Hello, thank you for joining us as we have our continuation of our class. And we are continuing to look at Catholicism, but the particular topic that we're going to be discussing is what will happen after death. We actually are going to be looking at the idea of purgatory and what purgatory is or what it represents. And that's going to be something that we're going to look at a little bit. Will purgatory really fit in with the biblical model? And so as we look at this, we are asking the question then, what will happen after death? And yes, this is a continuation of that examining Catholicism, because purgatory is one of those doctrines that Catholics do hold. You may be asking the question, what is purgatory? It's a good question. So let's go to the Catechism and answer that question. Catechism, the topic header that is given in regards to purgatory says the final purification or purgatory. This is on page 291 of the Catechism, the Catholic Catechism. It says, all who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their eternal salvation, but after death they undergo purification, so as to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy of heaven. So what they believe is that after you die, even if you have accepted God's grace, that was not enough. You have to go through a further process of purification, and ultimately it is punishment to purify out whatever imperfection is there so that you can get to heaven. And the same, it continues on in the Catechism. It says the Church gives the name purgatory to this final purification of the elect, which is entirely different from the punishment of the damned. And so this is something that the Catholic Church has created and formulated, and they admit that even in the Catechism and discussion of purgatory, when they say that the Church formulated her doctrine of faith on purgatory, especially at the councils of Florence and Trent. Now, that may not really mean much to you if you don't know a whole lot of Catholic history, but if you look at those two councils, you'll look at the dates that are there. You're saying, no, wait a minute. So this doctrine had to be especially formulated and developed and laid out that far along. I mean, the 14 and 1500s. I mean, in the claim with Catholicism is it's been here since the first century. At least that is the claim, and we've discussed that. But here you have this doctrine that all of a sudden has come along, and they've got to really develop that thing because it's underdeveloped, and it hasn't been given attention, so they do so during these two councils. And why it took two, I don't know exactly, but this is what has been stated by them in their own, catechism. So let's continue to read on. It says the tradition of the Church, by reference to certain texts of Scripture, speaks of a cleansing fire. This is straight from the Catechism. So the text that they give, at least the biblical text, and the only ones that are given here in the Catechism are the two that are mentioned here. We're going to look at them both. 1 Corinthians 3:15, 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 7. And so they say, we got this from the councils of Trent and Florence, and then also there's some texts in the Bible that talk about a cleansing fire. So out of those, we created purgatory. And so let's look at the first text in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. We're going to go back. They only quote one verse, but I want to go back and put it in context. And so let's look at chapter 3, 10 through 15. He says, according to the grace of God which is given unto me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another buildeth thereon. But let every man take heed how he buildeth thereon, or thereupon. Verse 11. He says, for other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now if any man build upon this foundation gold or silver or precious stone, wood, hay, or stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide, which he hath built thereon, he shall receive a reward. And if any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. You say, no, does this have anything to do with purgatory? That is, somebody dying and then later on being purged from their sins in the afterlife and then eventually going to heaven. Certainly not. Has nothing to do with that. Matter of fact, Paul is talking about evangelism really in the text, and how some had divided the church. They were divisive, they were carnal, and being of Apollos, of Paul, of Cephas, and Christ, and trying to divide themselves. And he condemns them for that, and then he tells them to be very careful how they build upon it. And as he's talking about this, he talks about, and really the context that shows you what this fire has to do with, he says you need to be careful how you build upon Christ and the foundation that has been set. Jesus Christ is the foundation. And you need to be careful how you build upon that, in the kingdom, in the body, in the church of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Now when he's talking about every man's work, he's talking about saving souls, taking the gospel to the lost. And if you look at the context, it demands it. And as he talks about it here, he says there are going to be some that their work is going to survive and others are not. What we're talking about is when you go share the gospel, the good news, the salvation of Jesus Christ, and people either obey it or reject it, and even some that obey it, they're not going to continue to last. Because when you read, and we will in just a moment, the parable of the soil or the sower, you're going to see that not every soil is good soil. And though the seed goes to all of those different soils, not every one is going to last. Which one lasts? The good soil. And others have problems. It's exactly what he's saying here. And so it's going to be revealed by fire of what sort it is. And then the man's work abides that he is built thereon. And if that happens, there's going to be great reward in that. But if for whatever reason, when you go share the gospel and that person departs from the faith, that's not on you. Praise the Lord, that's not. He says that person's going to suffer loss, but that person's not going to be lost eternally. It is that person is going to sorrow and suffer because the person that they brought to Christ, the individual that they tried to help disciple and bring along has departed from the faith, has departed from Jesus, is no longer faithful, and is going to be headed to an eternal hell. That causes anybody to be disturbed and suffer loss, but that person's soul, the individual that was the soul winner and whose individual that they brought to Christ is now departed, that person, that soul winner, his soul is saved. It's not lost. It's not affected simply because the person that they brought to Christ didn't remain in Christ and departed. And so that's the text here. It's nothing to do with purgatory, and that's important for us to understand. Now, supporting evidence for this truth is Matthew chapter 13, 18 through 23. Hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one and catcheth away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which received seed by the wayside. But he that received the seed into stony places, the same as he that heareth the word, and anon with joy receiveth it. Yet he hath not root in himself, but dureth for a while. For when tribulation and persecution ariseth because of the word, by and by he's offended. He also that receiveth seed among the thorns is he that heareth the word. And the care of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, choke the word, and he become unfruitful. But he that receiveth the word, or that is the seed, into the good ground, is he that heareth the word, understandeth it, and which also beareth fruit, and bringeth forth some 100, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. So here again, put right next to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, is a perfect explanation of what is being discussed, especially in light of the further context and the discussion that is taking place in the chapters that are there of the Apostle Paul in the church at Corinth. Now, another passage that's used by those that believe in purgatory is 1 Peter chapter 1, 5 through 9. Not specifically 5 through 9, just the part that talks about the cleansing or the purging of that fire. And that's actually mentioned in the Catechism. What does that text have anything to do with? Does it have to do with purgatory? Let's look. He says, who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time, wherein you greatly rejoice. Though now for a season, if need be, you are in heaviness through manifold temptations. So, he talks about them being kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation. And then kept through what? Difficulties, trials, hardships, but especially through the heaviness that they're facing, that these manifold and multicolored, variegated, all kinds of sorts of temptations are facing them. They're called trials here in the text. And they're coming at them, and it's causing them great heaviness. And he says if you want to be kept through this, you've got to be kept with the power of God by faith in Jesus Christ, through faith unto salvation. That's what comes through on the other side of it if we continue to persevere in the face of difficulty. And through that faith, holding on to that faith, and we continue to maintain a faith in Christ, an active, obedient faith, walking in the light, as 1 John chapter 1, 6 through 10 talks about, then he says that salvation is what is on the other end of that. Now notice, he says in verse 7, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perisheth, though it be tried with the fire, may be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Now, what? What does this have to do with purgatory? Well, they're saying that this happens after. In that context, he's not talking to people that are dead or that are going to be dead. He's talking about those that are being purged while they're alive. Those individuals that are right now alive, that he's writing to, they're in this context, and those of the dispersia, diaspora, he's writing to those individuals, and he's telling them that as they go through difficulty and as they face the trials of their faith and the manifold temptations that they will face, that they will be able to be purified and purged, that this can be a good thing for them. Though it doesn't feel like it because it causes great heaviness, the text says, it can be great for them, and it can cause them to be like gold. You start off with this rough ore, and all of the imperfections are purified by the fire, and what comes out is beautiful. It's gold. He's saying that you're going to be able to be purged even though this difficulty comes upon you. And the trying of your faith is what he's talking about. The trying of your faith takes place now, not when you're dead. It's happening now. And he says the trying of your faith is what's going to be able to help you so that when you go through this and you come out on the other side, not only are you going to have this praise and honor and glory of Jesus Christ because you've maintained your faith by the power of God through faith into salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. Remember, context always answers what is being talked about. Verse 8, whom having not seen you love, in whom, though now you see him not, yet believing, you rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of joy, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your soul. So the context here clears up what we're talking about. We're talking about the individual who maintains their faith while here on earth, even going through difficulties and trials, and what? That's not what the idea of purgatory is. The idea of purgatory is once you've gone on, you're going to be purged, you're going to be punished, so that all of that didn't get out before is going to be purged out of you so that you can be purified. That is not what this text is talking about. This text is talking about while you're alive. It's not talking about after you're dead and what you have to go through there. It's talking about if you maintain your faith, even though you face hardship here on this earth, you hold to God's unchanging hand, he will reward you and he will be with you, and you will be able to glorify God because you passed through this intense trial of fire and difficulty. The text that is often referenced, especially for prayer for the dead, baptism, and other things that have revolving around the dead, and especially revolving around purgatory, is reference to Maccabees. Now, the Maccabees are not inspired text. They were rejected in the Jewish canon, and with the scribes that have come along for many, many years that have preserved the Old Testament writings, and the Jews themselves did not put it into their canon. Though there have been others that have come along, even Protestants in later ages, that decided that they wanted to add some text, and this is not the only ones, in what is called the Apocrypha. This was part of that. Now, the books of the Maccabees and the record of the revolt and all the things that took place is actually history. However, it's not inspired. And so it does provide a lot of information for the intertestamental period that took place, the 400 years of silence between the Old Testament and the New Testament. It does provide some insight as to what was happening and things that took place. However, these texts are not inspired and have not been accepted by those that were of the Jews themselves in that text. So let's continue on here. 2 Maccabees chapter 12, verse 46. It says, therefore Judas Maccabees, and of course that's been added for clarification purposes, Judas Maccabees has. Therefore Judas Maccabees made atonement for the dead that they might be delivered from their sin. And so this is where Catholicism has grabbed back into books that we do not have in our Bible because they're not recognized as being canonical or inspired and recognized as being such. They do not meet those standards. And the Holy Spirit certainly has not inspired these books, though they are recognized by us as being historical. And so they're going back and trying to grasp at straws. What does the Bible actually say? And let's see, is there any other supporting evidence? Well, we looked at the two verses that they mentioned in the Catechism from the Bible that do not speak anything about purgatory at all. So what does the Bible say about what's going to happen after we die? Ecclesiastes 12:7 says that there's two parts of us. There's dust and there's the spirit. It says, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. So it talks about the dual nature of man. As a matter of fact, in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26, it shows us why we as human beings are special. We're different. We're not just like the animals. We're different. What makes us different? Well, we're dual beings. We have a physical flesh, yes, flesh and blood, but we have a soul. We have spirit. And so when God created man, He said, let us make man, not the animals of the field, the birds, the birds or the sea creatures or any of those things. He said, man, let's make man in our image. It's not said of any other animals or beast. But let us make man in our own image and after our likeness. And so we have been created in that model, and because of that, we have a soul. We have an eternal part that God has placed within us that will continue on. And what a blessing it is to have that. Now, we determine whether we are going to be submissive to God's will and follow Him. We'll have eternal bliss in heaven. Or if we determine that we are not going to follow God and we're going to reject Him and turn away from Him and rebel against Him, we're going to have an eternity in punishment. And so the choice is ours. So what is unique about man is that man has a soul. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 1, he says, for we know that our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved. We have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Now, the earthly house of this tabernacle is just the body that we have, the fleshly body. So that's a temporary thing. Tabernacle was always a temporary tent of meeting, something that was not meant to be permanent. And then this talks about we've got something that is permanent, eternal in the heavens. So this body, this flesh and blood body, is never meant to be permanent. It's temporary. 1 Corinthians chapter 15:54 says, so when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption. There's going to be this change. Our physical bodies are frail. They're not meant to be here. They're not meant to be eternal. And so that's why they have to be changed. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, 1 through 5, over and over in this text, it points out the frailty of the human life and of the body. He says, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. And while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders the grinders cease because they are few. Now, he's talking about when you get old, in the day when you start to shake and tremble and you don't have a lot of strength, you're hunkered over and you're bowing over. Your grinders, that's your teeth. You don't have very many of them and they're not working good. And it says, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. That's when your eyes start to fail. And the doors shall be shut in the streets, and the sound of the grinding is low. So all of these things our bodies just start shutting down. We start having trouble with all of these things, whether it's our hearing, our sight, our teeth. Hey, if you're aging, you're feeling it. You know that. So the body is frail, but there's something in man that is eternal. And don't forget that dual nature, that physical flesh, yes, but then there is the soul, the spirit. In Psalm 90 and verse 10, he says, the days of our years are 70, that is 70. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years, 80, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. What is he saying? Life is short. Even if you get a full life, it's not going to be extremely long. And so we understand that. But there is another part of mankind that exists in Genesis 35 and 18. And speaking of Rachel, he says, and it came to pass as her soul was in departing, or she died. So there is that soul. You have the flesh that's passed away. She's died. She's perished. But then there is the soul in all mankind. Made in the image of God, they have a soul. Never forget that. No matter what race, what skin color, what gender, all have a soul. And all have that value that God has blessed them with. In James chapter 2 and verse 26, for as the body without the spirit is dead. So he goes on to talk about faith without works. But in the text here, James 2:26, the body, and then you on one hand, and then you got the spirit. But if you separate the two, if the body is no longer living, it's dead. When that spirit departs. And so again, when the body is lifeless and it has no more life in it, then the spirit then departs. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 1, for we know that if our earthly house, so this tabernacle word is all, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So there is something that is earthly, and then there is something that is eternal that we have been given by God. And what a blessing that is. 2 Corinthians 5:4 says, for we that are in this tabernacle do groan, being burdened, not for that we would be unclothed, but clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up of life. So he talks about the fact that right now we're in the flesh. We're in this temporary tent of meeting, this tabernacle, being burdened. We groan. This is tough. And then he talks about the fact that then there's going to be a time in which we're going to be unclothed, and then we're going to be clothed. That is, that mortality is no longer going to be there. We're going to be swallowed up in eternal life. But then there is an in-between stage in which there is the tabernacle, and then there is a time in which we have eternal life, but then there's a time we're unclothed. And that would be the time we're going to be discussing in a moment, which would be the Hadean realm. So, that unclothed period is the time in between. Right here, we're in the flesh, we're in blood, we're living, we're on earth. And then there is a time when we have eternity. But then there is a time that is in between that the text would be speaking about. So what happens when we die? What happens when we die? Do we go straight to heaven or hell? I do not believe that the Bible teaches that principle, and I want to show you why, and I want to explain this. And certainly, I do not believe that it teaches purgatory. So, what is the Hadean realm? Well, it's a dwelling place of the dead, a holding place for disembodied spirits. A lot of the material that I'm presenting has come from the World Video Bible School lesson on Where We Go When We Die by Don Blackwell. Good material. And so I wanted to present that material in correlation with what we're discussing regarding purgatory, because I feel like it all fits together. In order to know that there's no purgatory, we got to go to the Bible and see what it actually says regarding what happens when we die. Where do we go? When we have that answer, then we'll be able to know that purgatory is not there. The Bible doesn't talk about it. And so it's important for us to understand that the good and the bad are going to die, and when they do, where do they go? They go to Hades. Now, that may be a surprise to you, because you may think, well, only the bad people go to Hades. Good people don't go to Hades. In the way that maybe that word is in our mind, we may be associating it with hell, but that's not true. All go to what's called the Hadean realm. We just call it Hades, or the Hadean realm. That place, that abode that we just defined. Defined it as what? It's a holding place for disembodied spirits, a dwelling place of the dead, as they would call it. And so that is what the Hadean realm is. And no matter whether you're good or bad, that's a place where you're going to go to await finality. And that would be what we would call eternal life in heaven or hell after the great judgment. So, the Old Testament word that is used in Hebrew for the word Hades in the New Testament is Sheol in the Old Testament. In Acts chapter 2 and verse 31, it's speaking of Christ. He says, and seeing this before, spake of the resurrection of Christ, that his soul was not left in hell. Now, unfortunately, the King James many times does not translate this Hades, even though New King James and American Standard and others will do so. But, if you go back and you look at the original, you'll see very clearly that we're talking about Hades. And hell is not what this is talking about. There's two different things. There's Hadean realm, which is the unseen realm of the dead. And then there is what's called Gehenna hell. Now, that's the real thing. That's hell. And there's a differentiation between them in the Bible. And in this text, it's not using Gehenna. That's not the word that is here. It's the word for Hades. So he's saying that when Christ's soul went to the unseen realm of the dead, that is, when he died on the cross, and his soul went to the unseen realm of the dead, his soul didn't go burn in hell, and he didn't go to hell. That is certainly blasphemous, and the Bible doesn't teach that. So it's important for us to understand that. Neither did his flesh see corruption. Now, this text is quoting from Psalm 16, saying that this is a fulfillment of Psalm 16, by the way. And if you look at the American Standard, which is bringing again, that proper translation brings the word Sheol, which is coming from the Hebrew. It is not hell, as the King James would put it there as well. It is Sheol from the Old Testament, and that represents that unseen realm of the dead, the Hadean realm. In Luke 23 in verse 43, you'll notice in regards to the Jesus Christ, because we were just talking about him in the text here, and that he went to that Hadean realm after death. And we know that even on the cross, when he looked at the thief on the cross, he said, "Verily I say unto thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise." And so paradise is a compartment of Hades. Hades is made of two compartments, and it's the unseen realm of the dead. And Jesus said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." And that's very important for us to understand. In Hades, there's a place where the righteous go, and there's a place where the unrighteous go. It's important for us to understand that. The righteous are going to go to paradise. And then those that are wicked are going to go to torments, and all of them are awaiting the great day of judgment that the Bible talks about. Now in Luke 16, we have the rich man and Lazarus, which gives us a very good biblical description of this. And even in verse 23, when it uses the word hell in King James, that's not the word that is there in the original. It's actually Hades. So we're talking about the Hadean realm. And in Luke 16, with the rich man and Lazarus, it gives us that picture of the Abraham's bosom, and also on the other side, somebody that there's this great gulf that's fixed between them. And so Lazarus, this beggar, he dies, and he's in Abraham's bosom, and he's doing great. And then the rich man dies, who had everything on earth, but when he died, he went to torments. He was suffering. He was in anguish. He just wanted a drop of water to cool his tongue. And then the Bible says that there's this great gulf that's fixed so that neither one can pass to the other. The guy that's over here in paradise can't go down into torment. The guy that's in torment can't go to paradise, and there's no changing. There's no transferring. There's no working your way out of that torment like this rich man was. There's no way of working your way out of that or anybody helping you get out of that. It's fixed. This is it. And so when you die, that's where you're going to go to await the final judgment being passed. Though your eternal destiny is sealed when you die. You have a chance to work on that while you're alive. But when you die, it's sealed. You go to one of the other places, and you will wait for the final sentence to be passed so that you pass on into those other areas. Now, the two compartments of Hades, or the Hadean realm, is paradise and torments. Paradise is Abraham's bosom in this passage. It's in the Hadean realm, and it's where the righteous go. In Luke 23 and verse 43, it says, when Jesus was there, and we just read it just a moment ago, when Jesus spoke to that thief on that cross, he says, "Today you shall be with me in paradise." And that's the place where there is no torments. And it's also called in Luke's account, Luke 16, of the rich man and Lazarus, is called Abraham's bosom. The same place that is being described here. But then there's the other compartment of this afterlife, the Hadean realm, Hades, and its torments. So we got paradise on one hand, torments on the other. That is temporary until the final judgment. And so in 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4, it says, "For if God spared not the angels that sin, but cast them down to Tartarus," is the proper translation, "and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment," as he continues on. King James puts hell, but it's actually talking about Tartarus. That is torments. That's what we call that. That's where this man went. In Luke 16, when it's talking about the comparison of the Abraham's bosom, and then it talks about that rich man who died. It says the rich man died, he was buried, and it wasn't in hell, because that's not proper translation. If you go back and look at the original, it's Hades, the Hadean realm, the unseen realm of the dead. And in that compartment, he lifted up his eyes when he had died, being where? In torments. So this is the same place that would be referenced in Tartarus as well. So the torments. So you've got paradise and you've got torments. So when you die, there's the two compartments that are the waiting place for that final judgment. In Luke 16:26, it says, "And beside all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot. Neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. Even though people that are in torments would like to get out, they cannot. That's just what the Bible says. So there is no room for a purgatory or purging to say that there are people, once they die, that are still bad. Though they say that they have a relationship with God, they're still impure and evil and wicked, and that's got to be purged out of them. Really, that impugns upon the saving power of the blood of Jesus and the grace of God that has been extended to them. To me, it seems, though, that that is true. But certainly, the Bible doesn't teach that there's going to be some sort of place where you can, if you didn't get it done here on earth, you can get it done later after you die. You don't have to worry about things now because He can take care of it after you die. That's the idea of purgatory, but it's not biblical. And that's important for us to understand. John 5:28-29 says, "Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming, in which all that are in their graves shall hear His voice and shall come forth. They that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation." So which one are we going to be when we die? There's two compartments here. Those that have done good, those that have done evil. And that's where you see paradise on one hand, torments on the other. Romans chapter 4 and verse 12. We're all going to have to give an account. There's a judgment day that is coming. Nobody's going to escape that day. And that's going to come. Some people may still be alive when Jesus returns. They may still be alive. And so they're going to have to be changed, called up in the Lord with the Lord. And according to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 13-18, they're going to be called up with the Lord. And so then there's going to be this, what we would consider a judgment scene. There's going to, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, those individuals are going to be changed. So there's a change that's going to take place. But then the Bible talks about that judgment in which all are going to be judged. So the soul and the spirit are separated. There's going to be a literal bodily resurrection of what is there, and it's going to be changed. And then the spirit, which has been waiting in paradise or torments, is going to be reunited with that changed body, and then is going to be granted entrance or going to be rejected. According to Matthew chapter 25, in that great judgment scene, there's sheep, there's goats, and there's a separation of them. And so there's going to be that great day of separation. And the Bible says we're all going to have to be there, and we're all going to have to give an account of ourselves to God. Nobody's going to escape that day. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10 says, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body, according that he hath done, whether it be good or bad." And Matthew 25 and verse 46, "And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, the righteous into life eternal." So when you read Matthew 25, and you read that context of the separation of the sheep and the goats, those that have done good and those that haven't, and he explains everything, he then sums it all up at the very end there and says, here we've got these, they're going to go away into everlasting punishment, then the righteous into life eternal. So we've got the everlasting punishment that awaits those that are in torment, and we've got the life eternal that awaits those that are in paradise. And those are the options that are there. That, hell is real. We don't want to go there. Revelation 14:11 gives a little bit of an insight as to that place that he was just talking about in Matthew 25:46. And here it says, "And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day nor night." So it's eternal. And it's something that continues to go on. It's everlasting punishment. There are some that say that they end, that they no longer continue, they cease to exist. The Bible doesn't lay that picture out at all. So what's going to happen after death? We do not see any room for purgatory in this. We've studied through the text, we've studied through the Bible. What we do see is that if we die, and let's say I die today, I'll give an example of me. If I die today, then I'm going to either be in paradise, Abraham's bosom, or I'm going to be in Tartarus, I'm going to be in torments. And there I will stay until the Lord's second coming. When He does come back, then all will be gathered together. That is, those that are alive on the earth will be changed. And as the Bible pictures in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15, there's going to be that great resurrection. And then everybody's going to be gathered together. Now those souls that are waiting, Those souls that are in paradise and those souls that are in torments are going to have to still stand before the great judge on that day. Now, they're going to meet their fate eternally after that this sentence has been passed. But notice, 1 minute after death, they know. They know. They knew in Luke 16. Rich man, Lazarus, they knew where they were. Rich man was suffering on earth, man. He had a hard way to go. We say a hard road to hoe, right? It was tough for him. And yet when he woke up in paradise, it's exactly what it describes. Then you've got the rich man who had everything in the world here on this earth, but when he woke up in torments. Brethren, you know. You know. And so it's important for us to be prepared. There is no second chance. Purgatory tries to provide somewhat of that. There is no second chance to try to alter the status or the place where somebody has gone. Prayers for the dead won't do any good. Baptism for the dead won't do any good. And I'm going to tell you why. Because of the verse that we just read. When we read that there's a great gulf that's fixed and nobody can change the results, then it doesn't matter how much you pray. You're not going to change that. You can't make somebody go from one side to the other. The Bible doesn't teach that. They have sealed their destiny based upon how they've lived on this earth and if they've accepted the gospel of Jesus Christ and lived according to His will. Their destiny is sealed. And if they rejected that, if they rejected God on earth and they pass away, there is no second chance. That's why it's so important to make your life right with God right here, right now, and do not put it off. So it's important for us to understand. There is no purgatory. There's no second chance. There's no praying for those that have gone on or dead. All we can do is do what we have right here, right now, and to make sure that we are right with God here and now. Hopefully this has been a beneficial class to you. I know we're studying Catholicism, and we have been for some time. We've been studying and looking at all the different beliefs, especially moving in some of the various doctrines, and this is one of them. Purgatory is one of them, and some of the other things that I mentioned as well. It's all encapsulated. Really, it all comes together, and we can see that the Bible doesn't support that. It's just not there. And so when we don't have authority for things in religious matters, we don't do them. And we're talking about that in our class on I'm a member of the Church of Christ. You know, if you don't have religious authority, you don't have the Scriptures to back up what you're doing, you don't need to be doing those things. And certainly we don't have that to teach the doctrine of purgatory. Thank you so much for joining us for our class. I appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully this has been a benefit to you. And if you'd like to study further, I would be more than happy to sit down, open up the Bible, and to study with you. If you're concerned about your soul and where you're going to be for eternity, please open up your Bible. Please contact me if you want to study. If you want to talk about it, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And we can try to just open up the Bible, and I'll try my best to give you a Bible answer to questions that you have. Thank you so much for tuning in. May God bless you.